Imagine this scenario. You're out of the office unexpectedly, and a colleague pings you because they need access to some system you have credentials for. Now, my listeners would never send passwords over email or Slack. But what about your coworkers? How many organizations out there are sending logins back and forth in plain text? Worse yet, how many just store all of their logins on a shared spreadsheet? Keeper Security's password management platform locks down logins, payment cards, and more in a patented zero-knowledge encrypted vault. Sign up for a Keeper free trial today. Visit securityweekly.com/Keeper. Picture your team being able to map out the external attack surface as it grows and see the same attack vectors as a hacker does. Most tools out there do asset discovery, but stop there. Enter Detectify. It takes an inventory of exposed web assets and automates vulnerability testing for security misconfigurations, expiring subdomains, and risks in third-party software. Here's the cool part. They crowdsource payloads from leading ethical hackers. It finds bugs you actually want to fix and finds them in time. Start a free 2-week trial by visiting securityweekly.com/Detectify. Go hack yourself.
Is your team ready to defend against the latest cyber threats? Validate human cyber defense readiness with RANGEFORCE. Sharpen your team's capabilities with a cloud-based platform that takes a real-world, continuous approach to cybersecurity skills development. RANGEFORCE empowers cyber defense readiness at scale. With hundreds of interactive modules, learning paths mapped to industry frameworks, skill assessments, and team-based defensive threat exercises. Visit securityweekly.com/RANGEFORCE to learn more. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feeds and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, our Discord server, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms, which include YouTube and Twitch. All right, this interview is sponsored by CyberArk. Len Noe joins us today from Paris to talk about trends in attacker innovation and the role of identities and credentials. Len is a technical evangelist at CyberArk and does a crazy amount of speaking around the globe, has done a little bit of everything in security, but has focused on offensive security for the last 9 years, and turning himself into a cyborg. Welcome to the show, Len.
Great to be here, Adrian. Really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a great conversation.
Yeah, and we will get to the biohacking and cyborg stuff. But first, I wanted to kind of dive into. Well, I guess first of all, what made you switch over to more the offensive side of stuff? Because you've done blue team type stuff as well,
actually, right? I was actually more of a black hat, gray hat for most of my life, and decided that, I started having grandchildren. I really had to take a look at my life and decide what type of role or influence I wanted to have over them. And to that point, even when I was doing a lot of black hat work, I was never more one of those malicious type of black hats. For me, it's always been about the puzzle and the challenge. So I'm the type of hacker that would log into your computer if you didn't, or break into your router if you had not reset your default password. And I'd leave the text document on your desktop that says, reset your password. This isn't safe. So I was never one of those, I want to steal your data types. I was more just, am I better than the security that you have in front of your systems?
Right. But you did, maybe it was more IT type stuff. You did sysadmin stuff. Development.
Oh, yeah. I was a system architect. I was a web designer. I did email administration for the automotive industry back up in Detroit. I've been doing IT pretty much consistently for almost 26 years in every role, from programmer, systems architect, web developer, web designer. I've always been really enthralled by the concepts of breaking security. Even when I was a kid, I've been a lock picker my whole life. So it wasn't that I was in the security field. I was in more of the administration and architectural roles, and did a lot of the offensive stuff on my own time as a hobby.
Okay. Well, let's, talking about thinking like the attacker, let's jump into kind of the current trends that you're seeing in attacker innovation. Like, I assume cred reuse is still a thing, right?
Oh yeah, credential reuse. The truth is, especially if we take a look at just the way identity has evolved over the years. I mean, it used to be. I remember back in, I started back around the Novell days on the token rings, so I've been around for a while. And back then it was pretty simple. It was a named user and a password, and that's really all you had. Now we have APIs, we have shared secrets, we have IAM roles. I mean, there's one user could potentially now have up to 30 to 40 different potential identities that they're dealing with in their daily operations, and it's just completely widened the landscape. You take that in with the concepts of ransomware and doxware. We're dealing with a whole new platform. And if you take a look at where a lot of the attacks were back in the day, it was about stealing people's identities. It was about stealing corporate data. I've been on the Nexus website and down on the darknet, and human identities are now being sold in blocks because there's really not as much value to them anymore. The money is all coming from ransoms and hijacking of data and the threat of exposure of corporate and proprietary information. So, I mean, it's a completely different world.
Yeah, who wants to try to fence individual credit cards and identities and stuff like that, for anywhere from $5 to $400 a pop, when you can, get paid millions off a single,
exactly
months of work, couple of weeks or how.
That's exactly the point. I mean, I was absolutely shocked. The average U.S. identity is only, like you said, worth between $2 and $4, and you can buy blocks of these in 100 to 100,000 for very little money. But when we take a look at identity theft and all of the preventative measures that people have around credit cards, banks, mortgages, the value to the attackers just isn't there like it was back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. 80s, God, I'm carbon dating myself there.
But I would assume that there still is some value in being a component of that extortion attack, right? Using identities, like, maybe you want to get into a particular company. I haven't seen a whole lot of evidence that attackers are all that targeted. It seems more like targets of opportunity, just as long as somebody's got money in the bank, right?
Exactly. I've said for a long time, and I love to start a lot of my presentations by quoting Sun Tzu, because I think it's so applicable to cybersecurity as well. And, everybody knows the one about, if you know your enemy, and that's not the one that I like to use. I think one of the best quotes for cybersecurity to come out of the art of war is, if an enemy leaves a door open, you must rush in. And to me, that sums up the hacker mentality perfectly. We're very opportunistic people.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And it's hence the focus. We see a huge focus on external attack surface discovery and management and monitoring now, because it's so easy to have a door open and not even know about it, especially if you have a larger organization. It's hard to keep up with, just talking about the identities, and I consider that part of it, right? Like you see a lot of attack surface management tools that do include notification if any creds tied to one of your domains shows up on a list, that's been exposed or leaked, for example, right?
Oh, absolutely. With darknet monitoring, there are a lot of tools out there to try and help this, but with just around the concept of identity and user sprawl, period, the issue is, like I said, when you have like a 1 to 20 or a 1 to 30 ratio, it's difficult to try and maintain, security controls around every single one, because you don't, it's hard to determine where all of those identities are, be able to secure them in a fashion that still allows access in a detrimental way as far as production and efficiency. And there's always that line that you're trying to run in terms of, I need to be secure, but at the same time, I need my employees to be able to be functional and be able to actually complete their job assignments and perform their duties.
Right.
And therein is where we start trying to find things like intelligent privilege controls, to be able to help address those as in an automated fashion.
It seems like we're almost in a time of luxury at this point, though. Like for me, it's never been easier to manage my identities or to log into things. Like I'm a huge fan of password managers. I don't have to think. I don't even know any of my passwords, and it's so frustrating to me that we're still having all these issues where, I don't understand why MFA, at least in the enterprise, isn't more ubiquitous than it is. I don't understand why everybody isn't using password databases, because it just seems so much more convenient to me, right?
Well, beyond the convenience, it provides auditing, and I don't know if it's the stigma of I need to be in control of everything with me as a person, but I mean, like I said, I've been doing this for forever. I don't remember all the passwords I've used over the last 20 some odd years, and I agree with you. I think, using password databases, just a quick side note, I was actually on an international trip once, and, I was pulled off to the side because I was traveling with a lot of my tools because I was speaking at a conference, and, the customs people, were trying to figure out if I was actually, a bad actor or, am I here to do good? And when I told them that, here, research this, look this up on the internet, the agent actually pulled up her lanyard, slid her official ID down, and her password was written on a Post-it note underneath her ID. So, I mean, to me, it was like, this is, and the funny thing is even sitting in, an interrogation room, I went into the security mode and was like, do you have any idea how unsecure that would be? You're a government employee. So yeah, I agree. Yeah. And as to why, it's mind-boggling to me, especially with the fact that you can basically just go into Google and search breaches, ransomware attacks, the list goes on forever. And beyond that, now that we're looking at the new additional controls around cyber insurance, this stuff is becoming more and more, even compared to your last guest around the PCI discussion, businesses and the people that are actually holding the financial strings are starting to demand this. And we still see pushback on trying to implement these controls. So, I mean, if you can't get insurance without MFA, why wouldn't you just do this to begin with? And, even if it's from a price point perspective, there are still very low cost services as well as open source services. So I would love to get an answer to that, but I don't have it.
So I want to take this in a slightly different direction with a quick question. I'm a former offensive security guy, but many moons ago, as you can tell by those that see on video here with my gray hair in my beard. But
real quick tip for you. I have 5 daughters, so I am as white as Santa Claus. They make some amazing beard dye these days.
Yeah, I might have to let that rip, but then I wouldn't look like, and again, for those that aren't on video, you won't see it, but I won't look like Big Head Tyler back here as much. So, referencing my big head of myself behind me. So my question though is, being an old offensive security guy from back in the day, I have thoughts on some things that have changed over the years and some massive trends that have changed. I'd love to get your opinion, since you remained in offensive security throughout your entire career. I'd love to get your opinion on cloud. The shift to cloud native development. Has that drastically changed how the offensive side of cyber works?
From the offensive side, I would say that people have forgotten. A lot of the stuff that we've seen in cloud-based attacks are attacks that would never fly in an on-prem environment. We know better. I would actually chalk a lot of that up to the inability or misunderstanding around the concepts of IAM roles. I mean, most people will understand NTFS-based security or standard Linux-based security. You've got owner, group, everyone. In Linux, you've got standard groups like domain admins, you have local administrators, you have, computer users. When you start getting into IAM roles and the concept, I don't quote me on this because I know it changes all the time, but last time I checked, I think there were over 2,000-3,000 different IAM roles just within AWS alone.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
And to that point, it was very easy in the old days to say either I'm a root user, I'm a power user, I'm a domain administrator, or I'm an administrator. When we deal with IAM and identity, now we have to deal with the concepts of shadow admins, where you may not be in an actual administrative group, but you have the same functionality as an actual administrator within that platform. So administrator, I think, the term is being used very ambiguously at this point in the game, because I may not be an administrator in group membership, but I still have the same abilities that group would have.
Yeah, I mean, some of those terms aren't even all that useful anymore. Like we almost need different terms for some of this stuff.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think we're all stuck in the old vernacular, around everybody's like, I'm a domain administrator. I'm root. Okay. Well, I'm not, but I can still do everything that you can do, just through different roles based on the platform that I'm on. So I think changing the terminology and actually trying to get people's mindset to change may help the situation.
Yeah, I remember the first time somebody suggested to me, hey, because when you think of administrator, you think of it as the ultimate level of privilege, that inherits all the privileges below it. But in actuality, when you think about what an admin needs, take a sysadmin, for example, in very old school, very simple non-cloud example, with a database server, a Unix admin, say a Solaris admin, has absolutely no need to have access to the data in the database or the database itself at all in most cases. They need to administrate the system. But there's stuff actually, that you would assume they inherit privileges on that they probably shouldn't have privileges to. When you move to the cloud, it's, I mean, that times 10. There's so many cases where, in fact, it was fascinating. I used to go to reInvent every year and talk to Steve Schmidt and his folks. And every year they would set goals for themselves to reduce their access to customer systems and data by a certain percentage. And it was really interesting to see them every year go through this exercise of, how can we limit that potential blast radius if one of our people is either evil or, gets compromised or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's a really good segue into, the term of the month, being zero trust, the trust and verify. If we take that concept and we extrapolate it out into the cloud, the verify portion becomes exponentially more difficult.
Yeah, actually, that's Tyler's favorite term of the year, I think, is zero trust.
Of the year, and we managed to get it into both segments on today's show, too.
It's a great concept, and it's a really good framework and idea, but, when you look at it in practicality, it's very, very difficult to do. Especially with the concepts of identity sprawl and the total number of identities that are attached to a single user. It becomes very, very difficult to implement. Not impossible, and I think it's an amazing framework to try and work of, but, to the point that you were making about reInvent, some of these things take a very, very long time, and I think setting proper expectations for that in the beginning and using it as a definite goal to work towards is admirable. But to try and think that you're going to be able to, just jump into a new zero trust architecture, you have better luck trying to drink from a fire hose. It's a process that needs to be taken one step at a time.
It's a whale. It's a whale that you're going to have to eat, and there's no other way around it. You got to break it into a whole ton of mini projects.
Yeah. I mean, and how do you eat a whale?
Do you think it's impossible? I've been researching and writing about it. I worked for a zero trust company for a while. Obviously, it's still something we get asked about all the time, but the government in particular has had mandates to move toward a zero trust architecture for its agencies. So they're making strides. Identity-based, sorry, my dog obviously likes identities. Identity-based is only one aspect of zero trust. So are there other ways to start it? Because it can be done piecemeal. It doesn't have to be a whole scale shift. It can be, every little incremental thing you do makes the environment better and more secure.
Agree. Do I think it's impossible? I think that's a kind of a loaded question. I think that for some companies in their current mindset, yes. I think if you are stuck in the old ways of thinking and you're, to Adrian's question earlier, why don't we see MFA everywhere? I think some companies, just due to the culture and the mentality of the company, it will be impossible. I think if people are open-minded and understanding of the fact that this is going to be a process, and it's going to be a marathon and not a sprint, I think anything, like you said, anything that they're doing to improve their security posture is going to work towards that end. But I think it's going to be more along the line of their fortitude and whether or not they're willing to take those long gains and work them into the end. But
so how do we get it out of buzzword land and into reality?
I think that would come with different applications, processes, and for starters, I think we need to find a way to actually do some of it much more simply. The ability to ingest your privilege controls, provide flexible identity automation and orchestration, and provide continuous threat detection and protection. And we need to automate a lot of this and find some way to assist people almost in like a jump start, and break up the process into different phases and approach them, as was stated earlier, as individual projects working towards a greater whole. But if you're, it's the same thing, with, I work for CyberArk. We've seen the same issue around identity security since our inception, and if you try and come in and lock down your entire organization and try and move them into a privileged access management protocol in, say, like a week, it's going to be very, very difficult. If you start with your high value assets and you secure those, then you move to the next level down. It's the same thing, in my opinion, as far as zero trust. You start with the easy things. Start with your identity platform, move into your physical, move beyond there into your data centers, your storage area networks. Take the easy, low-hanging fruit. And I think one of the ways that we start moving this out of being a buzzword and more into an actual process is to start seeing some companies actually achieve either getting into a zero trust architecture or make major gains towards it, and stop talking about it in like, no disrespect intended, that, is it possible? Anything is possible. We just have to show people that it can be done and provide them a roadmap and how to get there.
See, Tyler.
Tyler, I think I cut you up a little bit earlier. Did you have anything else to add?
I always have something to add, but in this case, no.
So I love, Len, what you said there, about the company having to be in the right place, culturally, in terms of attitude, leadership. I often find that that's the biggest obstacle that most companies have when it comes to security, is like they're willing to throw budget at it, but you want to change how they work. You want to, introduce new things, and if you've got the wrong attitudes, especially in leadership, stuff like that's just never going to happen outside of a meeting. Like people nod their heads all day in the meeting, but then they'll get back to their desks and tear that stuff up, tear up those plans, throw them in the trash. They're not doing that.
One of the things that I've seen, especially over the course of my career, is, I feel that there's two different types of company and two different mindsets when it comes to security. Are you doing it because you're actually a security conscious company and you want your data and your employees and your customers' data to be safe? Or are you just trying to check a box and make sure that you comply with some type of regulation? If you're actually security minded, it may be hard to swallow, because maybe you're going to have to spend budget. Maybe you're going to have to spend time. Maybe you're going to have to, put out multiple projects. But if you're security conscious, it's easier to digest than if you're just trying to check a box to make sure that you say you can get your cyber insurance. There's a different methodology taken, and I think there's a different attitude when you approach it as something that you feel is a need from a security perspective, as opposed to, I need this to be able to continue selling and not get fined.
Yeah. Wait, Zero Trust is going to cost us how much? How much if we just add one of those web pages to our website that says that your security is very important to us? How much does that cost? How much?
Well, I've been a firm proprietor of the concept that, security is a pay me now or pay me later. You can pay up front. It might cost you some money. You get the security you need. You get the controls. You have the infrastructure, and you're able to protect your data. Or you can wait. Take a look at the average ransomware payout these days. What's going to be cheaper in the long run?
Deferred security. Yep. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. Pay me now or pay me later, but you will pay.
All right.
One thing, to this point, I remember when I, in my very first IT job, this was way back in the 90s. I remember we actually answered, instead of answering to like a CISO, that really wasn't there back then. I remember I actually reported to the head of accounting. And that's kind of where I got that concept from, because if you're answering to accounting, and these are people that are looking at nothing but numbers, IT and security was always looked at as an afterthought, or, basically that one of those mandatory evils that you had to do to be able to, continue running your business. And the truth is, we're not in that world anymore. And that kind of thinking is going to cause you a lot of problems in terms of your data integrity and your corporate reputation.
Yeah. Well put, Len. And we still have some time, so I thought, if we wanted to segue into, I think there wasn't really a smooth segue here, but into talking about biohacker stuff, we could do that now.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm on the bleeding edge, literally and metaphorically, in terms of the attacker's mindset. I'm probably one of the more well-known transhumans out there. I have currently 8 different microchips between my hands and my wrists that I use for the purposes of offensive security. I can do RFID, NFC. I can trigger attacks via my implants. And 2 weeks ago, I actually just implanted a credit card processing chip and an 8K Desfire V2.
How's it going with what's the progress on the peg leg?
Just talking to you, for those that may not know what a peg leg is, the original peg leg was a Raspberry Pi Zero W with all of the headers and everything removed, equipped with a wireless power receiver encased in biopolymer, and then surgically implanted in the thigh right below the front pants pocket. So that way you can take an external battery with wireless charging capability, slide it in your pocket. It would actually power the device. It was originally working with the Pirate Box software, and it was intended to be a logless file transfer, so you could actually give somebody potentially stolen information and there would be no tracking it. I kind of took that concept and kind of ran with it in a little bit of a different direction. So I'm working with a KiCad designer, and we're actually building a hacker's version of a Raspberry Pi Zero, and we're outfitting it with dual Bluetooth and dual Wi-Fi. And the whole point behind this is I plan on loading it up with Kali Linux and basically implanting it in my leg. So that way, if the concept behind this is I could potentially just be sitting here talking if this was an in-person conversation. And I could have my leg doing auto poems, low energy Bluetooth scans while we're actually just sitting here. And I become I love the fact that I've basically turned my body into the attack vector.
Is there some way that you can kind of trigger the power on and off? Like, I assume you wouldn't want it running all the time.
Well, Yeah, unfortunately, with the peg leg, that's something that I could shut down. The rest of my tags are either NFC or RFID and different physical access protocols like HID, Prox, and DALA. And those are basically inert until I get near a receiver, because most of my implants actually take their power from the receiver, not from the chip itself. So I told you about these the other day, and I actually brought them with me for this conversation. These are gloves that I actually had to have custom made to turn my hands off. So what I did was I actually went out and purchased Faraday fabric and hired a seamstress to actually sew them on the insides of these gloves so I can feel safe going to places like Black Hat and DEF CON, because I don't want to be hacked. Literally.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like it's pretty easy to brick some of these if you haven't set passwords on them, stuff like that. Like you can brick an RFID tag or an NFC tag pretty easily, right?
Exactly. And I've spent quite a bit of time, money, and pain getting these things implanted. So I really don't want somebody else to brick them on me. And to that point, I mean, I've done a lot in terms of research into where this stuff may be going. And we've seen so many advancements in the biomedical. Even as recently as about a month ago, there was a spinal implant done that was actually allowing quadriplegics some ambulatory movement again.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I was reading an article the day before yesterday where they're talking about utilizing DNA as a storage medium. And I'll get you the information, Adrian, because this is just an amazing story. But even in a very minute amount of mitochondrial DNA, they were able to extrapolate the fact that it would probably be able to store about 7 petabytes worth of data. And as long as the DNA is kept in a climate-controlled environment, the data degradation they're expecting to be minimal over at least 100 years.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Yeah, it's I've seen they're working on things where body heat, might be able to power some things, where you could have, you could obviously very low power devices, right?
Well, even beyond that, with the current trends and the new technology around graphene batteries, my little peg leg, a very small graphene battery would power that for up to 10 years. It's insane. And I feel like we're right on the cusp of a lot of different things. And, as being kind of a spokesman person for the transhuman movement, these are real attack vectors, and unfortunately, a lot of people out there don't even know that they exist, and it's very difficult to protect against an attack vector that you think is just science fiction and only seen on the movie screens.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was thinking about it. Now, I've had my implant in for 2 years now. And I was wondering, part of the reason I did is I was wondering how practical it would be, because I wasn't planning on doing anything offensive with it, just like getting it for practical uses. And I use mine every single day. In the apartment complex I live in, we have just standard RFID readers that work with the chip in my hand. And every day when I go to check the mail, when I go to use the clubhouse, get coffee, go to the gym, use any of the amenities here, I use my hand to unlock those doors. So not super fancy, like that's all I do with it, but I do use it on a regular basis. So it has some decent utility for me.
Yeah. For daily, everyday use cases, like legitimate use cases, it's an amazing thing. There are actual implantable microchips that can provide continuous body temperature readings. We've got the ability to put the valet key for a Tesla Model 3 onto an implant, so you can just jump in your car. You don't have to worry about your keys. Gyms, clubs, shared storage garages, these are all standard use cases, and they could make people's lives very easy. But just like one of the examples I like to use is, if you take a look at Benjamin Delpy's Mini Cats, that was actually originally written as a Kerberos auditing tool, but it's actually one of the top choices for offensive actors to try and break Kerberos. Any tool, regardless of its original function or design, can be misused. I know for a fact, I've got a couple of friends of mine that actually work on different red teams that utilize their microchips during red team engagements to make initial footholds on mobile devices and try to lateral back into the enterprise. So it's real.
Yeah, I think the only implants I wouldn't consider are the magnets. They seem like they'd be really inconvenient because you can't turn them off, and there's a lot of things affected by magnets, and especially people putting them in their fingertips. Like I just seems like there'd be so many inconvenient. Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, like wiping the mag strip on your credit card by mistake. You could cause all kinds of havoc with magnets.
I'm 6'2". I've got an 18-inch beard. I'm tattooed. I only have one tattoo. It just starts at my neck and goes all the way to my feet. And I am absolutely terrified of other magnets.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because you've got one?
Yeah, and I'll tell you right now, one of my brothers, Bronson, he thought it would be a real funny joke to try and come at me with an earth magnet. I'm not afraid of getting beat up. I'm afraid of magnets. Because there is nothing like getting from the inside and outside of your skin. It is not something I would recommend.
Yeah, especially with like I see them everywhere. I've got these magnet sheets that you can run over things to see where magnets are inside things, where the little, shavings of metal.
The little green kind of screen that'll actually show the magnetic pole.
Yeah, they're so much fun to play with. Like, for example, my iPad's keyboard is just chock full of magnets. It uses magnets to know when it's in keyboard mode. It uses magnets to hold its shape. Like, if I had a magnet in my hand, like it'd be used all the time, I would think. Yeah, those guys. Yep. Those are great.
Yep. Keep these around just in case I don't have anything metal. And people want to see what they're like. So yeah, I keep one of those in my wallet at all times.
Nice. Nice.
But to that point, the one thing I wanted to say in regards to this, and this might be something you might find really kind of interesting and kind of geeky at the same time, Adrian. I was reading an article about 2 weeks ago out of the Dallas News, and apparently there is a new breed of canine unit that's being worked on with the police forces in the United States. I mean, we've all heard about drug sniffing dogs. Well, now they have technology sniffing dogs. They've trained these dogs to key in on specific components of technology, and they're using these in the fight against pedophilia and human trafficking, because a lot of the times people are storing this type of information on hard drives and thumb drives. So they train these dogs to be able to sniff out technology. I actually reached out to the Dallas police force, and the next time I'm up in Dallas, they've invited me to stop by because they're interested, as am I, to see if that may be a way to detect somebody like me. Because currently, the only way you'd be able to detect me, because I don't trigger magnetometers at airports. I've been through the X-rays at airports. You would need a low frequency and a high frequency scanner, and it would have to be close enough to actually energize my chips. So if you take just a quick thought back to the Terminator movie, before, where all of the rebellion was always, holed up, they always had dogs out front to try and detect the cyborgs. And I'm wondering, after I meet this dog up in Dallas, is this going to be a situation where life imitates art or art imitates life?
Yeah. I wonder what those dogs are smelling. I wouldn't think that they'd be able to smell anything beneath the skin, Like, I would think it would have to be, plastic, solder, something. I don't know. The dogs are like magic to me. Like the dogs that can sniff when you have cancer and stuff like that. It's just absolute magic to me. They're amazing creatures.
Yeah. But they've been really accommodating, and they sent me a complete white paper on this canine. And if you'd like, I'll be happy to send you the actual chemical components that they've been trained to actually hit on. But I think it would be interesting, if you look, dogs, there are certain dogs that, service dogs that can detect when diabetics have sugar issues. I don't know what they can smell, but they can smell a hell of a lot more than me. So I'm actually very curious to see how that that interaction goes, because otherwise, how would somebody detect somebody like me? And the truth is, there really isn't a way that I've been able to come up with. So the only way to actually protect yourself as well as your organization is to actually really layer up on the security. You know, I've got an amazing example of bypassing physical security into locations on-prem. And the one thing that I wanted to ask you, in your professional opinion, I've noticed that most people do not have an issue when it comes to putting multi-factor authentication in front of their data. But how many times have you ever seen like a data center with a single point of badge access with no additional PIN or shield?
Yeah, pretty common, but not open to the outside, not open to the public, right? So like you have to get into an already restricted building. So I've seen multiple layers of single badge access before.
Yeah, but realistically, how difficult is it to social engineer your way into a restricted building? I know a red teamer that basically just dressed up like they were part of Iron Mountain and walked right into a building and took the actual Iron Mountain rollaways and just loaded them up in the back of a U-Haul.
Yes, I've had security guards help me load up computers from a call center into the trunk of my car. Absolutely.
So you know, the point is, you know, as much as I don't want to quote Kevin Mitnick, it's true. The weakest link in any security chain is going to be the human element. And we know that we can social engineer some of these people. So once again, we need to take that situation and take the human element out of the picture and not leave single points of failure, at least as far as I'm concerned. If you want to protect against a transhuman or somebody that can actually compromise locations and devices with zero indications of compromise. And that's the part that makes me a little bit different. I'm not doing anything that hasn't ever been done. I'm just doing it in a way that if you're a blue teamer or you try to do a DFIR and figure out how I got in there, all I got to do is say, hey, the door was open. You can call the police. They can search me. I don't have a Proxmark. I don't have a duplicate card. It's all maintained under the skin. And to that point, the US regulations around HIPAA have actually made it easier for me to conceal my implants because nobody can legally ask me about them.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's I would never use them for offensive stuff because if somebody was aware of implants, it's not something I can easily ditch and get rid of. So if I was going to use anything for offensive stuff, I would probably use like a cheap plastic key fob or something like that I could throw in a trash can or something like that. Like I wouldn't want to be in a situation where somebody knew the implant was in me and then, you know, I was detained for that, especially not in another country where, you know, I'm not exactly sure protections are there. Like somebody orders to have it cut out of me. Like, don't want to be in that position.
Yeah, for me, it's a little bit different because I'm all over the internet. So I won't be using mine in any offensive way outside of a controlled environment. But the fact that I can do it means other people can do it. And we're back to that same question of how do you know who's who and how do you know who can do what?
Yeah, I mean, you got to know what's possible, and then you got to run those scenarios against your defenses and your plans. I mean, that's not enough people just take those basic steps. You know, I think that's
and you're exactly right. We've talked about this 2 or 3 times over the course of this conversation. You know, nobody wants to deal with the basics anymore. You know, and to me, the basics are the three pillars: tier segregation, credential boundaries, multi-factor authentication. If you do nothing else, you put those 3 things in place, you're going to make my job as a hacker much, much more difficult.
Yeah, a lot harder. Yeah. Well, with that, I think that's a great place to wrap the conversation, Len. Thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today.
I really appreciate the time, Adrian. Love to do it again sometime.
Awesome. Make sure you visit securityweekly.com/cyberart to learn more. And that's it for our live show today, but we'll be right back with a pre-recorded segment from the 2022 RSA conference. Thank you so much, Tyler and Katie, for joining me today. No thumbs up, nothing. That's it.
Oh, okay. Tyler, it's always a no, Tyler.
I give the funny thumbs up. For those that aren't on video, I just gave a funny thumbs up.
That was a visual gag. We're taking the next week off due to it being a shorter week, with Monday being Independence Day here in the United States. So we'll be back the week after that. But the segment coming up focuses on attack surface management and experience in the age of security. Matt Alderman and Bill Brenner interviewed Brandon Williams, VP IAM Strategy at Ping Identity, and Mark St. John, Senior VP of Product for Looking Glass Cyber Solutions. So stick around for that. And it's coming up next, and we'll see you 2 weeks from now. Thanks for listening.